Thank you very much. Thank you to BookPeople and C-SPAN. And thank you all for coming to talk about King Larry, The Life and Ruins of a Billionaire Genius, which Business Week has compared both to an Elmore Leonard caper and also called a trashy analog to Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs. King Larry begins on May 21st, 1995, which if you were in the States was about halfway through the O.J. Simpson double murder trial. But on Saipan, it was a very beautiful Sunday morning, and a small plane, a vintage CB plane, took off from the airport there with two very important people on board. One was the Speaker of the House of the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, and the other was Larry Hillblom, who was better known as the H in DHL. The plane was going to Pagan, which is one of the northernmost islands, and nobody was really quite sure why. They thought Hillblom was interested in building an eco-resort there where they were going to look at some quarry. But regardless, the plane never returned. And this wasn't a particularly big surprise because Hillblom was known to buy really crappy airplanes and to not maintain them. In fact, one of the islands they had flown over on their way to Pagan had a crash, an airplane that Hillblom had crashed about a year and a half before and nearly killed himself in. So a number of his friends had declined to make the trip with him that morning, and no one was terribly shocked that this plane had also gone down. However, it was a real shock that Larry Hillblom was suddenly gone. He'd arrived in Saipan 15 years before, and he'd become a larger-than-life character in the Mariana Islands. He had bought the bank, he bought the airline, he bought the television and radio stations. He'd built dozens of businesses, including a pawn shop, and been a bartender. So he was very well known, and there was a sort of mythos about Hillblom that was just incompatible with him being dead. But when they went to search for him, they find the two other bodies. They found the pilot and they found the Speaker of the House, but Hillblom's body was never recovered. So this sort of furthered the sense of disbelief. But they had to presume him dead. He was lost at sea. And a few days later, hundreds of people flocked to Kingsburg, California, to pay their last respects. Now, Kingsburg is a little town in the Central Valley of California. It's just south of Selma, which is the raisin capital of the world, and about 20 minutes south of Fresno. It's a little peach farming town. But hundreds of people, including members of the Saudi royal family and Bahraini princes and CEOs of major corporations and billionaires, as well as normal citizens, DHL drivers, and friends from college, descend on this tiny little Lutheran church to pay their respects. And they're really surprised because what they all start to find out talking to each other is that Larry was not at all who he said he was. He had, for example, told people that his father was a bank robber who was electrocuted at San Quentin. And now they find out, talking to his high school friends, that Larry's father actually was a roofer who died of heat stroke when he was 2 years old. Larry had told them that he was the captain of the football team in Kingsburg. And they find out he was not the captain of the football team at Kingsburg, but he was a 130-pound linebacker who got his contact lenses knocked out so frequently that the picture in the senior yearbook is of the football teams on their hands and knees on the field searching for Larry Hillblom's contact lenses. They find out he wasn't this jock and this ladies' man and this sort of brilliant, charismatic person that they'd assumed he would be, but he was actually a very awkward kid who was raised in the church and obsessed with Howard Hughes. As one of Larry's friends back there told me, this guy is somewhere out there where the buses don't go. That was their impression of Larry. He furthered this impression by saying really odd things to people. Like his best friend, he told he was going to make a lot of money and move far away, never talk to him again, which his best friend sort of took offense to, and Larry just thought that this was, totally acceptable thing to say. He told him that he was going to make a lot of money and marry a Catholic girl because Catholics don't get divorced, and he didn't want to give half of his fortune to a Catholic girl or to a woman. He told him various times he wanted to be an actor, and then he decided he wanted to be an evangelist, so he would study Jimmy Swaggart late at night and somehow got the picture just to black out everything but Swaggart's eyes so he could study how this man manipulated and hypnotized people with his eyes. And he also vilified his mother for some reason. He would tell friends about all these wonderful things that his mother would do for him, like hay rides, and she actually drove him to law school his first year because he wanted to keep his job at the cannery in Kingsburg, which is about a 3.5 hour drive back and forth. And he would say, "Oh, you know, she did all these great things for me, the bitch." Like he had this very odd way of talking to people. He goes to Bolt Hall School of Law at Berkeley, which in 1967 is a hotbed of the anti-war movement and the feminism movement and the sexual liberation movement. And his eccentricity continues there. He's anti the anti-war movement. He ridicules the protesters, saying that more people die on the highways in car crashes than in Vietnam going to war. He ridicules Jane Fonda and Joan Baez and thinks it's ridiculous anyone would care what an actress or a singer thinks. And in class, he's totally inscrutable. His professors can't even understand him because Larry believes that the law should be a function of business. You know, law should be structured to help businesses succeed. So back to the memorial services, his college friends and law school friends and high school friends and people he knew in Saipan are talking to each other. They do realize that there's a couple of common themes in Larry's life. One is he's very, very stubborn, and the other is that he is a master at manipulating people to do what he wants them to do. And this is really how Larry eventually made his great fortune. He became a courier his last year of law school with a little outfit out of LA called MPA, and he would fly from San Francisco to Los Angeles every evening after he picked up documents at insurance companies and banks in San Francisco and the Bay Area. And then he would drop them off in LA, spend the night at LAX sleeping on chairs or wherever, pick up whatever needed to go to San Francisco the next morning, take the earliest flight out, and be back that afternoon in time to go to class. But he realizes there's a huge market for this because at the time it's really only the post office delivering mail and documents, and they're doing a very bad job of it. They're very slow and they're very unreliable. So the summer after he graduates from Bolt, he runs into the salesman from this little courier outfit, Adrian Dalsey, who's kind of a silver-tongued ladies' man, 55 years old, very smooth talker. And they decide they're going to start their own business and take advantage of this great demand for express couriers. Dalsey gets another guy, Robert Lynn, involved, who's a real estate investor, and he's going to provide the money because Dalsey and Larry are both pretty much broke. Dalsey, Hillblom, and Lynn, DHL, incorporate in September of 1969, and Lynn immediately drops out because Dalsey and Larry can't stand each other. They're complete opposites, and all they do is argue, and it's clear that this thing is just going to be a total disaster, which it is for the first year. They don't have any money. Larry's the only person available to be a courier, so he's living on coffee and methamphetamines and going back and forth between LA and Honolulu, and he's either living on a porch or on a friend's couch or in a station wagon. He's dumpster diving for food some of the time, and they're just unable to really sign up the clients they need. They can't get insurance. But the idea is so strong, and it's such a great, there's such a great demand for their product that eventually Dalsey's magic begins to work, and they get Bank of America, they get the Federal Reserve, they get Matson Shipping Lines, they get IBM, and suddenly it's just taking off because no one can believe that DHL can actually pick up their documents one afternoon, and the next morning before their office across the country or across the Pacific Ocean is open, their documents are there. It's just mind-blowing. You know, this is 5 years before FedEx. So word gets around, and DHL just starts to take off. And Larry's got this kind of odd charisma that gets people to work for free and to get people to rally around the cause. And he carries Chairman Mao's little red book around with him, and you know, he's just convinced he's a master of manipulating people, which he is. And in 1 year, their second year of business, sales go up 1,000%. It's just taking off like crazy. But that attracts attention. And first it attracts the attention of the FBI because the FBI is hearing about all these people flying for free. And it sounds like maybe they're flying something they shouldn't be. So the FBI sends two